Act for calendar year 2014 to continue our series of what we hope are helpful webinars. And first of all, we'll do the mundane housekeeping part. As usual, we're going to run on mute today because the audio works better when we do it that way. So if you have questions, we'll handle the questions after the session, not during. And if you have a question, email it to our support staff, just like any other question. That way you're helping us manage any questions you might have, and it helps us ensure that we're following up properly. We are recording this session today. You're lucky. It's an audio-only recording. I still don't have a webcam. This presentation itself, including the audio, will be posted on the internet. You can link to it from our community pages, community.schoollogic.com. We'll be using SIRS 4.2 1005 today, one of our latest versions. But you don't need to have the latest version to do this. We're going to talk today about term end update, and that's been going on since almost the beginning of SIRS. So you don't need 1005. Whatever version you have running in your school right now, I'm sure will work fine. The thing that we are going to talk about today a lot is we're going to talk about choices. That's where we're going to spend most of our time, because term end update is like a lot of the more involved processes in our software. The actual process itself is somewhat anticlimactic. Well, at least it is if you make the right choices along the way. The choices you make leading up to the final process, those choices are the big deal. And so that's what we're going to invest most of our time discussing. And if we make the choices right, the term end update process will go swimmingly. All of the first term grades will copy smoothly into history, will gain notoriety, will get huge bonuses, and will retire someplace warm. Okay. I can't guarantee the notoriety, I can't guarantee the money, and I can't guarantee someplace warm. So we probably should get down to business. And we'll start with an overview of where we're going today. On our way to doing the term end update, which is really like down here, we're going to check in with preferences. We're going to look at some courses and classes and choices that you make here and how they matter. Marks entry. Marks entry is kind of the whole deal here. I mean, it's the whole point of term end update is we want to take those term 1 grades and credits and whatnot and move them to history. So after we make sure that the marks entry are done, because that's, obviously generally done by the teachers, but I will show you several different ways that you can check up and make sure the teachers have been doing their part. The term end update report options tab, that's really where you run the process. And as with many of the other processes in our software, there's a report that goes into this. So you can preview the report, and we will preview a report today before we run this. Once you preview the report, you make changes if you need to, then you run the actual process, and you don't quite get to go home yet because I'll show you some ways to verify results. So that's kind of our roadmap for today. Preferences, that's where we're going to start. Let's go to the software right away. Let's do this. And amazingly enough, I preset SIRS to be at preferences. How did I get here? I went to the setup menu and I chose preferences. Once I'm on the preferences screen, we're not going to spend a ton of time here, but we're going to start down here, almost toward the bottom, where it says use midterm marks. And this is kind of the master switch that turns on the opportunity to make these other two choices. Now, I should tell you right up front that to be even concerned about this part of preferences, you have to at least have some year-long classes. If all of your classes are semesterized, then these part of the preferences don't really apply to you. Because if your classes only last one semester, there isn't a midterm grade to move to history. The class usually ends in either quarter 2 or quarter 4, and you just move that grade to history. Unless, of course, your class has final marks, then the final mark grade goes out to history rather than the quarter grade. So for this to come into play, you got to have a year-long class. Most folks, of course, have 4 quarters in their year. Your year-long class lasts all 4 quarters, But by engaging this first choice, you create the opportunity to move not just the fourth quarter grade to history, but also maybe the second quarter grade. If you wanted to do that, you would first engage this top choice, and then you'd engage move midterm grades to history. Okay? This guy turns it on. He's kind of the master switch, and then you say move midterm grades to history. Now, it's important to understand that preferences don't exactly exist in a vacuum. They work hand in hand with choices that you make, in this case, in class setup and schedule. So here I am in class setup and schedule, and I have a year-long course. Notice there's no, it's taught the whole year. Now, what's in preferences, you create the opportunity here to make the choices you see here. It's these choices that actually tell the system to move the grades when you run the term end update. Notice that we're not just saying, I want to move to history second quarter and I want to move to history fourth quarter. We're also saying, when you move to history, split up my credits and take half the credits each time. If you look on the information form, you see this is a half credit course. When you come back to the schedule form, you'll see I've done the math right. I'm taking a quarter credit here. I'm taking a quarter credit at the bottom. Now, this credit situation, by the way, is not driven by this other choice in preferences. In preferences, I've got a choice that says use variable credits. Use variable credits is something you're likely to see in Alberta, where they have these work experience classes. In the course setup, you might say the course is worth between 0 and 10 credits. When the teacher, either in TLXE or SIRS, enters her students' grades, she can enter any number between 0 and 10. So if Susie is out in the working world 10 hours a week, maybe she earns 10 credits. Well, Samantha works 3 hours a week and gets 3 credits. Okay, same course, same class, same teacher, but 2 different levels of credits awarded. And you make the choice, you create that opportunity by engaging use variable credits. By the way, this last choice here on the left, display final mark for midterm, we haven't talked about him yet. That choice creates the opportunity for you to award a final mark in any grading period, not just in the final grading period. The next thing we want to talk about is we want to talk about courses. In courses, we'll look at this guy, CAP, pre-calc. Exam types are important, and we're going to talk today about what are the elements you want to kind of double check before you actually run the term end update. Exam type. This is a government thing. Your government may require you to report on which type of exam this course is using. Now, the important thing here is not only which type, it's is there one at all, okay? If this field is blank, the system doesn't believe this course should be reported in the government reports if your government uses exam type. I should also note that class setup and schedule has a place for department exam. We're looking at courses here, not classes. On classes, there's also a place for department exam. That's independent of this entry. So spreadsheet data entry is a good way to check up on the other one. And I'm going to talk more about spreadsheet data entry in a minute. What else do we care about in courses? Well, government code. This is huge. Make sure this is right before you report this course to the government. And today, you want to get it right when you before you send the classes to history. Credit values. Here's where you create the range, the opportunity that any individual class is going to award someplace between 0 and 2. In class setup and schedule, so here I am at 0 and 2, that's the range, right? If I go to class setup and schedule and I go find my CAP class, you're going to see that CAP, pre-calc, information tab is somewhere between 0 and 2. Makes total sense. Here I'm creating the opportunity, here I'm creating the execution. Whatever my numbers are, I personally don't care what the numbers are, I just want there to be numbers because we're going to move credits out to history as well. Back here in course setup, a real interesting one is this guy called minimal grade. First of all, minimal grade only applies to courses which use numeric marks, and obviously most courses do. But the biggie is, if you leave this number at 0, it means that kids who score a 0 for the course will actually get credit for taking it. So most schools, most of the time, don't use 0. Maybe you set this to 50, like I have. The specific number you choose is your business. I just wanted to remind you how this works. Whatever number you choose to enter here, if the kid scores this number or higher, she gets credit for taking the course. Now, another thing to consider on your courses is on the bottom on the left here, this guy called allowed duplicate credits. Okay? Now, what's he about? Let's go back to our general math class, because it's this situation that I've created by saying allow duplicate credits. Let's get general math. We've got to wait on him to come up. Here's general applied math. Okay, this opportunity to spread my credits across 2 different terms, assign them at 2 different term times, this opportunity is created by me saying allow duplicate credits. You also, of course, will do this if you are a school where a student can take the same course twice for credit, or if you engage in a scenario like I'm showing you here. Now, while you and I might not think that quarter credit one semester and a quarter credit the other semester is duplicate, to our system, this is allowing duplicate credits, since the student will receive credit toward graduation in more than one reporting period for the same class. That's duplicate credits according to SIRS. So we just talked about courses. Whoa, time out. Now up to this point, we've been bopping around in courses, in class setup and schedule, and in preferences. That's a lot of real estate to cover. And I want to show you a centralized location where you can print at least some of this information, frankly, most of the information, that we've been talking about so far. And you can do it in one fell swoop, or at least in 2 fell swoops. SIRS lets you create a spreadsheet which allows you to view and even edit information. Now, as it applies to what we're discussing today, let's not get ahead of ourselves. As it applies to what we're discussing today, you can make a spreadsheet of course information, or you can make a spreadsheet of class information. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We'll get rid of our friends here from courses, and we'll get rid of our friends from preferences, and we are going to go to the setup menu, and we're going to pick Spreadsheet Data Entry Setup. The key word on there is setup. If you go to the setup menu and do what I just did, you can come in here and click Add, which gives you the opportunity to create a new spreadsheet. And then once you click Edit, it's going to give you the opportunity to go in and say, okay, when I create a spreadsheet, which pieces of information do I want to see on the spreadsheet? And as you can see here on this display, I've made a few choices. Now, I can either run it from here, the spreadsheet, or I can run it from the spots in the software where I expect the information to be. Get to that in a second. Let's see what one of these spreadsheets looks like. So I'm going to run it from right here. Remember, we went to the setup menu. We said Spreadsheet Data Entry. Keyword was entry. So the software is running around right now. It's gathering up the records, and here's my spreadsheet. I've chosen to run these pieces of information. Now, keep your eye on my first column, class name. As I scroll, that first column stays in place. It's like freeze panes in Excel. It's really nice, so that no matter how far out to the right I come, I'm still got the same. I know where I'm grounded over here. I know which class or course I'm looking at. So these things, these data spreadsheet things, you can create any, you can ask for any piece of information that was on that list. Now, I talked about you could run them from here, where you and I just were, the spreadsheet data entry setup. Or I said, gee, you could also run these from where you expect the information to be. If I was looking for class information, I could go to the schedule menu and I could say class spreadsheet data entry. It gets me to just the grid for classes, and if I go to setup and I choose courses, I can get to just the grid for courses. Now, how can you leverage that to your advantage? You could set up a security situation, particularly if you're a larger operation, where you could say, I only want my admin people creating the spreadsheets, but I'm going to create a security operation where even my secretaries can run the spreadsheets and verify the information. Because remember, this whole circus with the spreadsheet data entry, why are we doing it? We're doing it to see, have I truly entered the proper pieces of information at the course level and at the class level to let me go forward and do the term end update. That's why we're doing that. We took our little time out. I showed you the spreadsheet data entry. Let's go back and talk about classes, okay? And we'll show you some class setup and schedule issues that come into my term end update. On the information tab, which is where we're going to spend most of our time, I've got an opportunity here for department exam. Exam date, if you use diploma submissions. These are both fairly governmental related. Maybe your province or state cares about these, maybe not. Credit value, that's the credit value of this particular class. He's huge because he's going to get moved to history, absolutely. Have I made final marks? Have I created the opportunity? Maybe this class doesn't get a final mark. Maybe it does. I want to have that set up correctly, because if I don't have that set up correctly, I'm not going to get the grade I want moved over. Report periods and terms. Have I correctly defined which part is going to history? Most schools, most of the time, are going to have a semesterized operation like this. This is obviously a second semester course, and this second semester, we're only going to go to history once. That's what I was talking about a little earlier when we said most people are going to have semesterized classes. This is it. And I'm just waiting for my semester one example to come up here. He's telling me, and not quite displaying what we want here, but you get the concept. If this is a semester one class, then my class is going to look like this, and only the history from quarter two is going out to the history. There's another guy called session. I believe that's an Alberta thing. But all of these pieces of information that we're talking about are important for your students' basic history, for their progress toward graduation, sometimes for provincial and state reporting, and these pieces of information, like for instance here, direct the term end update as to what goes where. What is he going to move, the term end updater guy? Okay? So each one of these pieces of information might have multiple uses, and each one of these pieces of information somehow fit into that puzzle of the term end update. Marks entry. I said a while ago that the basic core of what we're doing is we're moving marks and credits and some other associated pieces of information out to history. So it goes without saying, I got to make sure I've got my marks in the software before I try to move them out to history. So I want to help you learn whether that's happened. Have the teachers been doing their job? Now, if you're already past the report card stage, you probably know, did the teachers enter the grades or not? But as you run up to report cards or as you run up to the term end update, here's about 3 reports that you can use to verify that grades have actually been done. If we go to the grades menu and we pick student grade reports and we run out here, I've got grade entry status. We're going to pick the term we want, the quarter we want. We're pretty straightforward here. Okay, there's 4 quarters in our year. I'm going to group it, says group by teacher. I'm going to pick all my teachers. I'm going to pick all my classes, and I'm going to just hit preview. I'm going to let that run while I chat with you for a minute. The thing to remember about the grade entry status report is that it's not always an accurate representation if, big if there are two marks. For instance, if there's a term mark and a final mark in the same report period. A user may enter a term mark but have missed entering the final mark, or vice versa. Either way, the grade she missed won't appear on this report. Of course, if you don't do final marks at first semester, you don't really care. But if you should have 2 or 3 marks in a given report period, and the system only sees one, it'll say, yeah, I see the one, and it won't bother to tell you, here's an example. It'll see the one, and it won't bother to tell you that the other one's missing. AP Calc, let's go see if we can find Teacher Lozak, and let's go see if we can find AP Calc. Okay. I've got one kid enrolled in that. That's not the point. The point is, have there been marks recorded? The answer is yes. Notice the status is okay. This class isn't supposed to have a final mark in my quarter 2. Okay? By the way, if you see this undone, you can be sure that none of the marks for that student for this report period are entered. So, grade entry status report lets you see, has the teacher entered their stuff yet or not? Okay? That's one of my examples of how can we figure this out. The grade verification report. If we go to grades and we pick student grade reports and we pick grade verification. This will take a second to come up. Again, I'm going to say the term I want, term 1. Do I want just quarter 2? Yes. So I'm only ever going to be able to pick one, but it will let me pick previous periods. Not so much worried about that. I want to know what's going on in quarter 2. You see I've picked all my staff, I picked all my classes. To make this run a little faster, I'm going to only choose my 12th graders, and I'm going to say preview. I'm going to let him gather information while I chat with you. Many schools print this off for teachers and may even require them to sign it or initial it and hand it back in the office. This is a big report. You would probably want to run this on groups, like you saw me pick, where I picked just the seniors. It brings in all the marks and can also bring in all the comments. So that can help this report get pretty big pretty quickly. Some schools control this from the office. They print it, they put it in the teacher mailbox, the teachers sign it, and it comes back. After that, you can go ahead and print report cards, or you could go ahead and run the term end update. Some have teachers print this report on their end, right? The teacher prints it on his end, then he hands it to you guys in the office. Some other schools don't just do this report at all. Now, see what we got in this report? Here's my accounting class. Here are my quarter marks, and here are my final marks. We see both quarter and final. We can see this teacher's done his job. I don't have to worry about the accounting class. Academics. I got some other teachers here. Here's a teacher in Adobe Photoshop. I probably need to get the marks in. I got to go jack these teachers up and say, hey, where are my marks? There's also another interesting report, the grade analysis report. If we go to grades and we go to grade statistic reports and we pick grade analysis. Now this one is best for very specific data. I can pick, do I want the final marks or do I want the period marks? Unfortunately, it won't let me print both at the same time. But again, I'm going to pick just the term and quarter I want. Do I want history? No. But I wanted to, this report on the whole is kind of probably a little underutilized. It could work for term end update, but as you see all these choices here, gee, I could print the history grades. You could print a lot of information and use this mark analysis report for more than just term end update. In fact, after you do term end update, you could come back in and click the history grades and see if they really got there, you know, for just the 1 year, just for your current year. I'm going to print all my courses. I'm going to print both alpha and numeric. Over here, I'm going to say I just want to see my seniors. And then there's this whole business about low mark and high mark. maybe you want to pick 48 or 49 as your low mark. Why would you do that? Well, if your school doesn't allow those, if you're saying to your teachers you can only score kids 50 and above, pick a number a couple below there. It helps you pick up the strays, and it gives you the base. You put, don't just ask for what's on the first floor. Ask for everything, and then see if you're going to get more than what you really expected was out there. Because sometimes teachers will make a mistake, or sometimes SchoolLogic will do something that the teachers don't expect, and the next thing you know, you're getting grades that are not within spec. I would say you probably want to run one grade at a time of this report if you're a large school, because this report's going to take some time. Mine wasn't too bad there. Now, what am I seeing? I'm seeing here is the one teacher, and I've got what's going on in his classes. I've got AP Calc, I've got Pre-Calc and Pre-Calc. I'm seeing the marks, government number, don't really care about this. I care that these grades are in. It's not so important to me what the grades are, it's just that they're in. Now, permit me for just a minute to talk a little bit more about this report beyond the topic of today's term end update. There's a lot of choices on this report, particularly down here, this lowest, highest marked business. You could use this report to do an F list. Or you could do a report of like at risk of failing. Maybe you could say, show me the kids who are scoring between 60 and 70, or 60 and 75, and see the kids that are in trouble but haven't fallen off the edge of the cliff just yet. You could do a report comparing sections or teachers to other sections or other teachers. Now think about that for a minute. If you had 3 English 9 teachers, each of them teaches 3 sections of that course, wouldn't it be cool if you could run a report comparing student by student, you saw the report come up a minute ago, it's student by student, the grades across those 9 sections. Now, like many reports, this report can be previewed, it can be printed to paper, or it can be sent to file. Imagine opening those 9 sections of English scores in an Excel spreadsheet. Well, gosh, from there you could do a pivot table, and then you could lay it on the desk of your boss and keep him out of your hair for like hours. But I digress. The reason you want to run this report as part of your preparation for term end update is because it will show you who has or is missing marks and what classes you need to be concerned about. So, okay, most of the preliminary checks are done. We've done a bunch of poking and prodding, and maybe we've even sent some reports to paper. I should point out that you don't need to run 3 different reports to verify which students have or do not have grades and credits. I wanted to show you there are a variety of reports which could meet your need. Your need simply is to learn which classes have the grades in, because you don't want to run the actual term end update until all of the grades that matter to you are in. Most operators will find one report that tells them that, and they stick with that report. Overall, so far, we've verified that the students really do have second quarter grades. Now, let's go look at the actual form that does the work. So we're going to go to grades, and we're going to choose term end update. As soon as that clears off my screen, here we go. At the very, very top of the screen, we picked the term that we want to deal with. Yeah, it says terms over here with an S. I don't quite really know why somebody wrote that S in there, because we're only going to pick one term at a time. And we always start with the first term, and let me explain that a little farther. There's a rumor out there that you don't have to do a term end update. And frankly, that rumor's true. Particularly, well, you don't have to do a term end update just yet. Particularly if you're a middle school. If you're a middle school who's not concerned about non-diploma course marks files, or you're not concerned about transcripts for colleges, you may not have any incentive to do a term end update now. And that's fine. But I want the middle schoolers to remember this. You must eventually do one term end update for every term and track combination that you see on the drop-down. I'm a single school. By the way, all of this business, you do this as a building person. So I'm a single school. I have one track and I have two terms. Pretty straightforward. But the point I'm making is when you get around to doing this in the summer, you don't get to come in and say, I'm going to do term 2 first. If you choose not to do a term end update now, that's great. But when you do them in the summer, you have to run them in order. Pretty straightforward. By the way, pay attention to the fact that the default setting here is term 1, and it's going to reset to term 1 every time you close this form and open it. So it's important to confirm your settings, of course, each time prior to updating. Now I've got this guy, the very first guy here is called currently enrolled completion status. This is asking what you want the system to do with classes which end this term. I can't really think of a reason to pick something other than completed. The next guy is exclude courses with an end date on or before. And frankly, this question causes a fair amount of angst. The basic premise is, do you have courses which do not get moved to history? Well, based on the date those courses end, you can exclude them from moving to history. Now, most people, most of the time, will say, no, I don't have courses, at least completed courses, that I don't want to move to history. So in that case, enter the first day of your term or the first day of your school year. So we're going to go in here, we're going to pick 2013, we're going to pick September, and we're going to say September 3rd. That's the first day of our school year. If you pick that, no classes that end prior to the first day of school get sent to history. And of course, there are no classes which end prior to the first day of school. Therefore, all your courses are going. You sweep them all up. At least they're not going to be excluded based on their end date. I want you to remember it this way. The earlier the date you choose for this box, the fewer courses you will exclude. The next one down is exclude students withdrawn on or before a certain date. With the previous question, I said there's a certain amount of nervousness. With this question, there's just a certain amount of confusion. I got to tell you, this question means exclude from the term end update students who have withdrawn not from an individual class, but students who have withdrawn from your building. Okay? Big difference. We're talking here about kids who are no longer enrolled in your building. Students who withdrew from your school during the term you're working with. Okay? So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say, I'm going to exclude kids September 2013. I'm going to pick the second weekend. Okay? I'm saying if Johnny withdrew from my building before 9/23, I don't want to move Johnny to history. Don't want to move his stuff. Okay? So, who moves? Well, in this chart on the left, we pick the grade levels of the kids we want to move. This is pretty straightforward. It is inclusionary. And here's a little thought. If you have a very large school, you might pick only 1 or 2 grades for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you have a big high school, maybe you just pick 9th and 10th or just 11th and 12th because it makes the actual process run faster. That's cool. But I want you to consider not only the actual process of term end update, but I'll give you a little sneak peek here by telling you on the road between where we are now and the actual term end update lies another report. Now that report is going to clue you in on every course and every grade that is getting moved to history on behalf of your students. If you want that report to run pretty quickly in a large environment, you may want to only do a couple grades at a time. Something to think about. And here's where you make that choice. I'm going to go just my 12th graders. Now these next 5 statements on the bottom, you got to get kind of close to your monitor to really see these 5 guys. Most people, most of the time, they pick them all. What do we got here? We've got move the government course code into history. Well, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? Do I wish to exclude from average the subjects that have no mark? Yeah, probably do. Do I wish to exclude master classes? Well, typically that's not where the students' grades are stored anyway, so I'm going to exclude those from history. And then this bottom one, do I wish to update the completion status for classes I do not move to history? Well, yeah, I mean, I want some way to close them off, right? In this group, the one that's interesting is this white box, minimum mark to include in history. What's the basement score that I want to move to history? You see 50 sitting here now, but I'm going to make a case that it should be 0. This means every class goes to history. Now, you can't score lower than 0, right? And you're saying that every class that has a grade of 0 or above gets moved to history. Nice. If I place a higher number here, like the 50 you saw in the beginning, then if a kid scores 49, because, I don't know, maybe she spent most of her class periods texting, well, that 49 won't get moved to history. Don't I want that in history? That's why I advocate 0 in this box, so that all the classes move. Okay? Now, let's go back up here on the right to this big box, because he's worthy of more attention than you probably thought when you sat down here today. Above this chart, it says, always send the following enrollment statuses to history. Now, the most important word there is always. This box actually overrides everything you set up here. This box moves every class that has a completion code that you pick, regardless of the end date of the course. That part of this form overrides the exclude courses with an entry date on or before. So what choices are wise here? Well, obviously you're going to pick completed. Why would you not move your completed courses? Beyond that, suit yourself. If you have a completion status of failed, this guy, you probably want to move those to history because you want a record of that, right? You want to know in history that Jennifer took a biology course in 10th grade and failed it, right? If you're in Alberta school, you only have 2 status codes for course completion anyway, completed and withdrawn. Now, to the left, well, let's talk about here on the right, this GPA business. If your school uses GPA, which of the 4 possible scores are you going to move? You cannot check, by the way, more than 1. The choice you see here, already made, is what I call plain GPA. It's the one that most schools move most of the time. Our software will allow you to calculate up to 4 different grade point averages using different criteria, different courses, whatever. Most people, most of the time, are going to only move 1, and it's their most normal one, if I can use that word. It's simply, with your choice here is simply, which of your calculations do you want to move to history? On the far left is the final piece of this form, this grade level selection. We talked a little bit about it up front. It determines how long the process itself takes, and the longer it takes, it also talks about the pre-update report. You know, I said we're going to run a report. We're going to get to that in just a second. So for the sake of speed today, you saw me pick 12. Some people run this 1 grade level at a time for reporting purposes. Then when they're sure all their ducks are in a row, they come back and they run multiple grade levels at a time for the actual update. I'm going to go ahead and click preview. So I want to get this started while we continue to chat. We've got this form filled in with what we think are smart choices. Couldn't we just go click update right now? I mean, whoa. At this point in the process, I would ask you to resist the temptation to jump on the update button. There's a report that we're running, which is going to show us student by student and class by class exactly which pieces of information are going to be stored in history. Here I am. Here's my class. Here's my kid. Here's all the classes the kid are in. Here's my teacher. Here's my term. Here's my marks. Okay? I don't want to be sitting here with a bunch of zeros. Okay? These guys should be filled in. Notice I even get a message from the system that says, hey, no mark. Course exists. Previous credits. Okay, this is strength and conditioning course is something that's already in Aaron's history, and this is apparently not a course where I've said you can have duplicate credits. Okay, you'll see a number of those in here. So this is an important report. It's going to give you a message, and it's going to show you, here's the kid's grade, here's the kid's credit. So you see up front, before you hit the update button, what's going on out in what's really going to get moved to history here. Now, like most of our reports, you've got these choices, right? I could have printed that to paper. I chose to preview it on the screen. I could send it to file. If you hit preview, you got, let's say, 3 grades here selected or a bunch of grades. You could easily get 150 pages to go through. And even though preview, what I just showed you, is a great report, some folks don't choose preview because the report's so big. They choose instead to send it to file. Then they open it in Excel. Get a lot of interesting fields, but if you know how to use auto-filter in Excel, you can tell within minutes if you have mistakes before you run this. Dump the file into Excel, look at marks, look at credit values, look at the messages. For one thing, you could auto-filter the marks column on 0. It would be easy to see who hasn't entered marks. It's kind of hard to demo the Excel part in a webinar today. That's why I'm not doing it. But the report will tell you which teachers don't have marks in. The report will tell you item by item what's going out to history, which credit levels, are those correct. Obviously, you don't want to run the term end update until all the marks and all the credits look good. Now, a word to the wise here. People will preview this report. They'll learn that some piece of data needs to be changed, and they'll go immediately to change it, which is all well and good. If you do a preview and see bad stuff, and you go change that stuff, when you come back to the term end update, before you push the button, go check the stuff again. You know, I'm saying run the preview a second time. When you have the report on the screen, though, you notice that I clicked the close the door button. It let me get out of the report. It let me stay in SIRS. Now let me talk a little bit about the let's break this down step by step even farther. If you leave this term end update, if you leave it up on your monitor, when you go edit your students, that's great. Maybe you minimize it. Maybe you just leave it here like I have. Don't close this form, okay, when you're in the process of editing these kids. Because if you close it, you're going to lose the settings that you've already made. Most people don't realize that. When you're finally ready to run the TEU, make sure that your dates are correct here and you've chosen a proper term. And I would add this. If you have access to your tech staff, this is a pretty good time to make a backup before you actually click update. Now, I know that can be challenging to get this done in a multiple school environment. I get that. But having a backup before you hit update, not a bad idea. Once you are satisfied, all the marks are in and everything else is to your liking, you click update. Wow. Clicking this is pretty anticlimactic, isn't it? I told you it would be. After you've run the TEU, by the way, we strongly advocate that you only run the term end update once for a given grade level and a given term. We've heard tell that some people have run TEU twice and gotten away with it. Bully for them. They were lucky. We do not recommend that you run TEU more than once. But, all is not lost. In the interest of leaving you with a little optimism here, let me tell you this. Changes can be made in student history. They might be labor intensive, but you can manually go into student history and change practically anything. Your challenge will be that everything over in history is owned by an individual student. For instance, if you need to change the band grade for every kid from percussion to brass, you have to open each individual student and make the change. It's not like current year where you open the class and there's 156 kids in one spot and you can edit their grades. It is, of course, possible to edit student history through SQL, but you didn't hear that from me. It can be a process. So after you run this process, well, what next? Verify your results. After the term end update has been completed, verify the accuracy of course records that have moved to student history. Let's go look at a couple things that you might want to look at. You can actually start out in class setup and schedule. And in class setup and schedule, go to the enrollment tab. Okay? If these classes would have been completed, students won't display here anymore. Pretty straightforward. Regular classes and even subclasses. Enrollment, here's the way it works. If your class is multiple terms long, these kids will be cleared when you get to the final term. If you have a CTS module, enrollment will be cleared during any term in which a final mark was entered. You can go to the schedule menu. You can come up here, you can pick student enrollment. On the student enrollment display, classes which end in the term being updated will now have a completed status. And the end date will be the same as term end date. Classes which were manually completed have an end date prior to the term end update. Okay? It makes sense. You manually completed them maybe a week ago, maybe a month ago. They retain the end date that you entered manually. Term end update won't override that. Marks, individual mark entry, if you go look at mark details, any final mark that was moved to student history will be marked as moved to marks history. Okay? So if you go to the individual grades entry, that's what you're going to see. But I want to take you right now to student history, because this is kind of, I mean, what pops up in your mind first when you say, okay, I've done my term end update, how am I going to go verify that? Most people most of the time would say, well, I'm going to go to student history. And we're going to go to marks. And I want you to confirm the accuracy, first of all, on the mark detail card. That guy comes around again. Here I am in mark details. Okay? Is my term right? Is my course status right? Does it show up completed? What about my start and end date? Remember, if the kid has a late entry or early withdrawal, these dates are not going to match the term end date. That's okay. We want dates here, valid dates. GPA number, did the GPA come across the way I told it to? Does this number make sense? What about my mark? What about my corresponding credits earned? Okay? These are all important things to look at in the student history. And I'll tell you something else I've seen. I've seen user-defined reports created to run these checks. We've seen user-defined reports check these information, and that can work great. And hey, just before you guys leave today, can I offer you some advice? Because I don't want you guys to end up in the ditch. You know, on most of these webinars, I'm like cramming to get done in 60 minutes. Not today. Today, I'm already done with term end update, which is what we came to discuss. I'm just going to take a minute of your time before you leave to go ahead and offer you some overall advice, which was kind of sparked by a recent incident. Now, I've always had this idea, and I know that a lot of schools already do this, but I was reminded again this month that what I'm about to tell you could be valuable. It's my humble recommendation that all processes, not just the term end process, if I were involved in SIRS or SchoolLogic at a building or a district, I would have a 3-ring binder full of notes and stuff. And I would make sure that screenshots are in that binder of the choices that I need to make for any of the major processes, like the one we've gone through today, term end update. But what about the process of printing a report card or printing a transcript? Okay, the choices that you make are probably different than the school district down the road. Now, I'll admit that what I'm about to tell you next is kind of an extreme example, but it did happen to one of our clients in the last few months. Their primary SchoolLogic operator was hit by a car. It was pretty serious. By the way, praise God, she's doing better now. But I'm pretty sure that from her hospital bed, she wasn't phoning her coworkers and saying, hey, here's the choices you make on the report card forms. So I'd suggest to you that you train multiple people on your staff to be capable of running our products. And you have some kind of Bible, some kind of, I've got the screenshots, here are the choices that I need to make handle my unique situations. Like I said, I don't want you guys to end up in the ditch someplace. I want your headwinds to be minimal, and I want your trails to be smooth. As usual, if you wish to review this presentation or share it with a coworker who couldn't make it today, wait till Monday or so, and I'll have this webinar up on the internet. You know, I think that interweb thingy, this internet business, I think that's going to take off. And you know where to find us, community.schoollogic.com. Hey, thanks for coming out today. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.